So this is where we left off in the previous lesson. We had all the parts separated and ready to work on the rigid bodies. If you didn't get to this part, no problem. This model with all the separated parts is going to be provided in the project files. So you can start from here. With that, let's start working on the physics. So we want to make this car move forward using some physics. The first thing I'm going to do is select everything, go to the object menu, rigid body, add active. Now if I hit play, everything will explode for the simple reason that everything is using the convex hull collision shape. Now we can start by changing the collision shape for the main body from convex hull to mesh. If we hit play, we get something like that. And we can also add a ground using Shift A, plane, Alt G to clear the position, scale this up and scale this on the Y. Wait, let me make this really large, just like that. And let's go to the material tab. First thing I'm noticing is the car looks like is floating off the ground. So I'm going to go to the render settings and turn on ambient occlusion so that we have some contact shadows. You can even expand that and increase the distance or the factor by 2 to make these shadows more pronounced. This is just for looks. It doesn't really affect how the car is going to behave. I don't want this to look too bright. I'm going to create a new material for our ground. New, let me call it backdrop, and give it a darker material for the base color. You can even increase the roughness just a bit. And now if you hit play, it still goes through the ground. So let's select the ground, go to the physics tab and give it a rigid body, but the type, let's make it passive. If I hit play, now everything stays around, which is good. Now the other thing I'm seeing is that this is just not behaving as I expect. So I'm going to get all the other pieces that are not behaving the way I want for now, like this. Use M to create a new collection and let's call it extras. And for now, I'm just going to remove them from the rigid body so that we can worry about them later. I'll go under the object menu, rigid body, remove. Now, if I hit play, they're not part of the rigid body anymore. I can even hide them for now so that we're just working with a simple thing like this. Let me take a brief moment to explain how we're going to use constraints to make the car move. Remember, constraints are just a way to determine the relationship between two objects. For example, I can have a relationship between this car tire and the car body. What I want is to have this car fixed onto this car, but keep it in a way that lets it rotate this way. And do the same for all the other tires. There are different ways to create constraints. One is just to go to the physics tab, make sure that both the objects are rigid bodies. I'll just collapse this a bit and add a constraint. Now you can apply constraints directly from one object to the other, like we're doing here. I'm applying the constraint to the tire, and then so I can select the tire itself and then the car body. So if I hit play, you can see I've created a relationship. Actually, let me just raise the car up so we can see this. You can see this tire is always fixed onto the car. So that's one relationship, but you can see the others that have no constraint can break away. Now the limitation with this, if we change the type, the constraint type to hinge, is that we don't have an easy way to control the direction of the tire. So I want this to roll forward in this direction. Because I'm creating a direct constraint from this tire to this, I don't have a lot of control. That's why we use an extra empty. So if I instead use an empty, let me just add it exactly there. So if I add an empty, so instead of tying this constraint directly to this car, I can use an empty to connect these. I can give this empty a rigid body constraint. That way I can select these two as the target. Now don't forget to remove the constraint you added to the tire. So we get the same functionality, but here we can also just move this empty to any point. Let's bring the tire here, maybe here, And now you can see that we can have an offset on the tires, which gives us more control. Now let me delete these tires and maybe just have this empty here. Shift D, duplicate this on the X. Shift D, duplicate this. Just rotate this 180 degrees. Rotate this 180 degrees. I can create an offset in the constraint if I have an extra object. This extra object just allows me a lot of options. Just allows me more control. Now, if I want this to roll forward, I can just duplicate this tire, maybe have it here, and make it like this. So we basically have a connection from here to here. Now we can create a connection from here to here using another constraint. Since this is also a rigid body, I can just add another empty here. Let's make sure it's in the center of the tire. Rigid body, type fixed, connect this tire to this tire. See that? But we can do something even clever. We can change this to a hinge. That way this tire can rotate. But since we have this axis free to move, I can change the orientation of this axis. That way this rotates. Right now our hinge is rotating on the Y axis, on the Z axis like that. But if I rotate this 90 degrees so that the Z is pointing this way, that means our hinge can rotate this way. So now I can just scale this. So you can see how we can build a suspension system by doing this. Let me first remove all of this. So I'm doing this just to show you the importance of using these empties instead of tying the constraint directly to the body, because you can do that, but you will lose a lot of control. I'm just going to select this. And if you want the cut to feel more heavy, you just have to make it way more. So that was just to remind you what constraints do and how we can use them here. Let me undo all of these so that we can go set up a more simpler rig that is easy to destroy. And what I'm going to do to make this, to test if this can roll, is add a plane. I'm going to tab into edit mode and edit it a bit. You can hold down Z to get the shading pie menu. Go to wireframe, and you can also use Alt Z to just toggle between that. And I'm going to edit this and turn it into a ramp. I can just push these down. I think I can also just scale it on the X just like that and push it about there. So I'm going to animate this coming from the ground. So I'll turn on keyframe recording, push this down on frame 0, move ahead to frame, let's say 20, push this up just like that. Let's go to our look dev. I'm going to give it a new material. Let's make it red just like that. Okay, like that. We can go to the physics tab and turn on rigid body. This time it's going to be passive animated. If I hit play, it rolls, but the tires are not attached. So let's attach the tires using constraints. The first thing I'm going to do is first hide these so that I can see under the tires. I'm going to come here. Make sure that the cursor, you set the cursor at the center there using Shift S to get the cursor pie menu, and just snap the cursor to selected and add an empty. We can use these arrows because they're going to be very helpful to show us the direction of our constraints. Since we want these tires to roll on the X axis, That is going to be determined by the rotation of these, of the empty. Let's go back to frame 0, go to the physics tab, create a rigid body constraint, and just select the tire as object 1 and the car body as object 2. If I hit play and bring back my plane, let me just bring back my cube here, and I'm also going to go to object properties and go to viewport display, change this to wire so that I can just see the wire frame of this. You can see this is now attached to the body as we want. To make things much easier for me, I'm going to keep this object, this empty, parented to the main body, because right now if I hit play, it's not moving with the car, which can be a bit confusing. So I'm just going to select this and select the body last, use Ctrl P to set parent, but use keep transform. That way, when this is moving, the empty is also moving, to keep track of how everything is connected. I'm also going to duplicate this, Shift D, move it on the X. Just make sure that it lines up with the center of the tire, just like that. And in the physics constraints, we just need to select this wheel as the first object. Since they're all attached to the same body, the second object can stay the same. We can also do this for the last one. Now we have that. Now we can go back to the extras, make sure you are at frame 0, and do the same thing like we did for the tires. And Shift A, add an empty. I can scale it down so that it's not too large. Remember, we removed these from the rigid body system, so I'm going to add them back as a rigid body object, which is active. I can select this empty, rigid body constraint, select the main car as object 1 and this as object 2. It doesn't matter if these are interchangeable, the constraint will still work, and you can see now it's connected. I'll do the same for this. Just cursor to selected, add an empty, and make sure this is a rigid body, and select the constraint, rigid body constraint. This is object 1 and this is object 2. Playback, that's attached. We need to go to this door, which is the last part. You can come here, add an empty, arrows. I can scale it down a bit. Make sure this is a rigid body, and give this a rigid body, and just select the different parts. And now we have our car just like that. Just make sure that all these constraints, I can even select them using Shift G to select by grouped and select by type to parent them to the main body. Keep transform. Perfect. In the next lesson, we'll look at how to make these tires roll.